my beautiful mythical creatures, Ace here, Keishi, and I'm coming at you with the second part of Kaijin chapter 14. Off we go. Animal woke a little over a week later with a feeling of dread pressing down on him. Tonight's another fight night. This one would be different. It marked almost a year since Animal had become the champion of the pit. Obakia was planning something special. The Animal started his routine, the only thing that kept him sane, when he was alone in the cellar of the old factory where Obakia had built his underground fighting empire. Breakfast was already sitting just inside the door, a bowl of cold porridge and some tea. It wasn't tasty, but it was filling. A perk of being the boss's personal fighter was constant meals and time to rest. As much as Obakia, and especially Tensuru, liked tormenting the shapeshifter, they liked money more, and Animal brought in a ton of cash. Animal ignored the food for now and started doing some stretches. As he bent at the waist, resting his forearms on his feet, he felt the sting of the fresh tattoo on his back. A couple days before, Animal had been ordered to lock himself into the monocles hanging from the ceiling. "Congratulations, Animal," Tessuru said mockingly as he entered. 43 kills. That's more than any other fighter has achieved. All Animal could do was snarl, knowing the man would shock him until his knees gave out if he lunged or kicked. You're nearly at 2 rows of marks." Tensuru banged a black case on the table and opened it to reveal a tattoo gun and a vial of black ink. "How many do you think you'll have when you finally meet your match?" Tessuru lifted the back of Animal's shirt, his nails running up the boy's spine, making him shiver. His thumb brushed over the completed tally marks, feeling the raised skin under his fingertip. Animal heard things when caged in the VIP room and during the pre-match exhibition when fighters were put on display for audience to study before placing their bets. The cryptid's feral persona made people think he was simple, too dumb to understand, but he was always listening. Tessuru liked them young, and he liked when they fought. He was a brutal mercenary that craved power in all aspects of his life. Animal was never more thankful for the protection of being Obakia's champion granted him when he was alone with Tessuru. The buzz of the tattoo gun filled the cell. Animal kept still and stared at the ground with empty eyes. A familiar, numb feeling washed over him as Kill 43 was immortalized on his skin. The men and women that entered the pit were often the scum of society, villains that had committed the most heinous crimes. Maybe they deserved death, but Animal had never wanted to be a killer, only a survivor, and he always asked for forgiveness in this moment, begging for the sting of the tattoo and the cold metal around his wrist to be punishment enough. Animal straightened up, shoving the memory into the darkest corner of his mind, with all the other thoughts and images. If he wanted to survive, he had to keep pushing forward. He put the food on the table before picking up the cup of tea and made his way over to the sink. He downed the lukewarm liquid in a few gulps, using the cup to swirl water in his mouth and spit. He would give a lot just for a toothbrush right now. The cryptid caught sight of himself in the mirror. His eyes looked dull, and bags underneath were dark against his pale skin. His hair was long and pulled back with a strip of cloth ripped from the sheet, revealing pointed ears covered in piercings. It had been Arvis's solution for carrying his abilities. Obakia knew a woman with a quirk that let her manipulate the appearance of small objects, like size, shape, and color. He commissioned her to make custom piercings, and she had delivered a set of mostly white jewelry with green accents that would have been quite beautiful under any other circumstance. Animal had snarled and spit when Tessuru gripped him in a chokehold to keep his head still and his jaw closed, after he tried to bite the piercer. Even though the pain and fear, Animal's mind went back to sitting among soft pillows while gentle warm hands gave him his first piercing. On his birthday, tears ran down his face when the needle broke through the collagen of his ear. One of the last memories he had of his siblings was poisoned. Animal turned his head to study the jewelry. About 2/3 of the way up his left ear, there was a white ring with a thin green line running through it, made of rabbit bone. Just below that was a small white ball stud made of bat bone. In the lobe was a white and black band wasp spider leg that had been straightened and hardened to resemble the porcupine quill that was threaded through the top of his right ear, like an industrial piercing. On the same ear as the quill, halfway up, was another ring with green harsh marks along the edge made of lizard bone. Kaski's shed had suffered the same fate as Queenie's fur, but Animal let himself feel a tiny bit content, knowing he still had Himmy's and Dobby's gift. The final ear piercing had been the most painful. The piercer's ability worked best on objects, but that didn't mean she couldn't use it on people. She pinched his right earlobe between her fingers and forced it to stretch until the hole was big enough to slot in a tiger's claw, with a delicate pattern of green swirls etched into the white colored tin. Animal had gritted his teeth and breathed heavily through his nose until the burning sting stopped. The next were facial piercings. Bullhorn was molded into an ivory septum piercing with a green gradient at the tips. 2 snake fangs, one from a rattlesnake and the other from an island taipan, were stabbed through his bottom lip. The points of each tooth was a toxic green, like they were leaking venom. Animal sighed and sat on the floor by the table to eat breakfast. It was likely all he would get until right before the fight. It was how they made sure he behaved during the exhibition. If he didn't growl and show off for the mob the way Obakia wanted, then he would go into his fight hungry. After breakfast, he went through the rest of his routine, a standard full-body workout, what yoga he remembered from Himi in a circuit of repeated punches and kicks to get his muscles warm. The collar suppressant was off, so he did some quirk training too. He was still getting used to moving with Snake. The thick, flexible body was difficult to coordinate at first, but now he was pretty good at control. It was great for captive. He could pretty much match a boa constrictor in strength now, but he tried to avoid that during a fight. The crowd expected death by bite whenever he had someone in his coils. He hated biting. The taste of blood made him gag. Then the hybrid venom was fast-acting and agonizingly painful. The first time Animal had killed an opponent with venom, watching them wither and bleed from every orifice as they shrieked in pain. He kept it together until he was escorted out of the arena. As soon as he was out of sight, he fell to his hands and knees despite the poles and collar choking him. He heaved and vomited until the muscles in his neck had torn and his throat burned with acid. He was sobbing and hyperventilating, shaking so hard he could hardly hold himself up. Tessuru had grabbed him by the collar and thrown him against the wall, calling him pathetic and weak. Through his blind panic and disgust with himself, Animal fleetingly thought that he was okay with being the most pathetic person in the world if it meant he felt something than taking a life. Animal tried to keep himself focused all day. He repeated his punches and kicks with Tiger active. The boost in strength compared to Housecat was astronomical, but his agility suffered. Good thing Rabbit made up for it. As Animal was sitting against the wall meditating to try and stuff off boredom, a loud bang on the door made him jolt. The small window opened, revealing Tensuru's inverted eyes. "Hey there, pet. Cuffs on." Animal grumbled quietly and made his way to the center of the room. He snapped the overhead cuffs in place, chains loose enough that he couldn't quite put his hands on his head. "Give us a rattle," Tessuru ordered. Animal hissed, but gave the chains a hard tug to prove he was secure. "Good boy." The door opened and Tessuru entered, followed by Obakia. Animal's eyes narrowed at the fat man. He normally never saw the master of the pit on a fight day. He was too busy with his VIPs and trusted Tessuru to make sure Animal was properly riled up for the battle. "Aren't we obedient nowadays?" Obakia said, his eyes darting down to the cryptid's mouth. A white scar stood out on his bottom lip from when Obakia backhand him with his rings for disobeying in front of VIPs. "I came to wish you luck. I've invited the champion from a rival district to challenge you. This may be your toughest fight yet, Animal. I hope you know that if you lose, the mob will not grant you life. Who wouldn't want to witness the downfall of a god?" Obakia walked forward into Animal's space. The boy growled lowly, his chest rumbling like a far-off thunder. Tensuru readied his thumb on the shock button, his eyes daring the fighter to try something. "You're a gladiator, Animal, a powerhouse of strength, and a genius strategist. You shouldn't be cooped up in the basement between battles. Obakia's voice was full of soft awe, and that lent his words a level of genuineness that most people would believe, but Animal bared his teeth at the man. The cryptid had been studying Obakia closely. His quirk had something to do with compulsion and making people susceptible to suggestion. Animal would listen to Obakia smooching to the VIPs before asking a favor and witness how they bent to his will. The cryptid realized that Obakia was trying to use it on him since day one. He had complimented everything about Animal, from his intelligence to his body, but the boy seemed to be immune. He wasn't sure why. It could have been that the quirk required a certain level of pre-established trust to forge the connection. It could be that the target had to believe the compliments were genuine, and Animal did not believe Obakia had a kind bone in his body. Or maybe it was because Animal was more beast than boy now, and his instincts fought against his arch-rival, having any more control than he already did. Accomplished warrior deserves a place of honor. You would be able to have whatever you desire: delicious food, rich clothes, power, money. All you have to do is stay by my side and follow orders. It was the same offer as always, made with sweet words meant to tempt the boy into becoming Obakia's loyal pet. But, as always, the man's cork died on his lips. His promise sounded hollow to the shapeshifter, and maybe that's why Animal had never fallen for his tricks. The man could not offer the boy what he wanted most. You could become a lord if you just bowed to the king. Normally, at this point, Animal would growl at the pair, making it obvious he wasn't moved. But today, he was tired and looked at the fat man with dull eyes, just waiting for the facade to be over. Obakia reached for Animal and grabbed his chin. Eye contact seemed to be the final step before he had control. Force Green was forced to look into pale yellow. He really should have been more careful around a wild animal. The cryptid hissed and bit Obakia's hand. The man screamed. Animal didn't break skin. He bit just hard enough to keep the pudgy hand secure, but had an unexpected bonus. Tessuru couldn't shock him without also shocking his boss. Obakia continued to yell and dropped his cigarette as he tried to push Animal's head away, but the cryptid growled like a dog protecting a bone and clenched his jaw threateningly. "Just get him the fuck off!" Obakia screamed. Tessuru hesitated a moment, debating if he should take the risk and shock the feral boy. Animal kind of hoped he would. The shock was more likely to make him bite down than release. In the end, the mercenary decided the color wasn't the answer and punched Animal in the gut. The shapeshifter gasped, finally freeing Obakia's hand. The man retracted, looking down in shock and disgust at the already purpling crescent of teeth marks around the third knuckle of his pointer finger. "Fucking bastard!" he swore. Tesseract took that as permission to punch Animal again, making him lose his footing. He hung from his wrists, his eyes watering and coughing as air rushed back into his lungs. The boy smelled smoke. He gasped and choked on a scream as Obakia pressed the burned end of his cigarette into his ribs, making the flesh sizzle. "Dogs that bite are put down," Tesseract snarled, wrenching the boy's head back by his hair. He placed the side of his hand, sharpening into a razor edge, at Animal's throat, waiting for his boss's order. Obakia had managed to compose himself, standing straight with his cigarette held continuously, but Animal wanted to smirk when he noticed the stray strands that had escaped from his slick back hair, and how he didn't have his hand in his pocket like he normally did. He held it gingerly, trying not to move it. Obakia regarded Animal with calculating eyes. If the cryptid could actually feed on the sin, he would be gorging himself on wrath right now. But this was a man built on greed. He still saw dollar signs when he looked at Animal. Now, Tesseract, if you train a dog to fight, you have to expect to be bitten," he admonished as if he was talking down a child. However, even feral mongrels can learn to obey their master if you discipline them right. No more food before the fight. He stays awake for 3 days. Animal snarled. It wasn't the first time they had withheld sleep as a punishment. He would stay in his cage with someone watching him. They had orders to do whenever they want to keep him awake. Most people shocked him. A few liked to hit him. One used their quirk to make everything he touched feel scalding hot. Tesseract was the worst. He would poke him with needle-sharp ends of his fingers until he was covered in small puncture wounds, weeping blood. Tesseract's phone chimed. "Showtime," Obakia said gleefully. "Get him to the exhibition and make sure he shows off for the crowd, or I'll add another day to his punishment." Entering the exhibition hall was always a fiasco. Obakia liked to play up Animal's ferocity by having him escorted past the specters in a muzzle and straitjacket with metal poles in the back to keep his spider legs from manifesting. He kept the quirk suppressants off so Animal could turn on his ears, eyes, and horns for the mob's viewing pleasure. A pair of guards held him at a distance with metal poles on his collar, occasionally jabbed or pushed him towards people, making it look like he was attacking. Occasionally low shocks ensured Animal growled and fought his binds like a wild beast. Once he was pushed into the cage, he was on his own. Animal was expected to put on a show. He rattled the cage and snarled at anyone lingering too close, the ropes keeping them a safe distance from the cryptid. The straitjacket was purposely loose, so he could eventually free himself and reach through the bars or strike with his spider legs. Tesseract was always close by, ready to shock him if he tried to break the cage. People jeered and threw things, trying to rattle the feral creature up more. Other fighters from the undercards were scattered through the room on their own areas. Normally, no one else was chained or caged, either here, own free will, or more obedient to their masters. Today, Animal caught sight of a pair of girls with pale skin and black hair to his left. They were handcuffed together and shackled to a support beam by their ankles. One was yelling at the crowd, cursing and tossing things back that were thrown at them. The other completely docile, but she was studying everyone coldly. The picture of a confident killer. Occasionally, her bright cinnamon eyes would fall on Animal. He stared back, meeting her gaze with a challenge of his own. They were his opponents. I'm going to call that the end of this episode. There's going to be one more part to this chapter. I'm sorry if everyone wanted to know the end of this. But I don't feel like reading the rest of it, so sorry. So, the third part of chapter 14 will be up next. And poor Izuku. I feel so bad for Izuku. I hope everyone also feels bad for him. Just a silent moment to mourn his happiness. But, and Obukia, I just want to kill them there. Like, but hopefully the rest of the part of chapter 14, if you guys haven't read it, you're still hoping he gets safe soon. But until next time, my beautiful mythical creatures, stay hydrated, stay out of the bad weather if it can be helped. And remember, eat donuts. Bye bye.